I alluded to making a video on this film over 2 years ago, and I am finally getting around to doing it. The reason I've been putting it off so much is because I want to do it right. This is undoubtedly one of my favorite animated movies of all time, so naturally I want to do it justice. From all my examination of the film itself and other people's reviews of it, I can categorize its enticements into 3 categories. Its themes of racial/gender discrimination and stereotyping, its character development and relationships, and being a fun buddy cop movie. Admittedly, the latter is more surface level than the other two. On the very off chance that you don't know about this film, here's the not so quick rundown. The movie follows this rabbit named Judy Hopps, who has always dreamed of being a police officer ever since she was a kid. But instead of the film following her journey to achieve her dreams, the movie just gives us a quick montage and BAM! Dreams acquired. The end. Great movie. Okay, so I guess the actual plot revolves around Judy needing to find a missing otter in 48 hours, or else she has to resign.
2 days to find Emmett Otterton.
Okay.
But you strike out, you resign.
Okay.
There is no reason she needs to agree to this though, because the mayor himself assigned her to this precinct, so I'm pretty sure this Chief Bogo character can't fire her, but whatever. I would say that he's prejudiced against rabbits or something, but honestly, Judy really shouldn't be complaining on her first day. What? I'm just saying. And after being just so appalled by her chief's underestimation of her abilities as a rabbit, she then proceeds to be suspicious of this fox named Nick Wilde, just because he's a fox. Yeah, kind of a hypocrite. But then, oh wait, he actually was bad news the whole time.
I stood up for you, and you lied to me.
It's called a hustle, sweetheart.
Judy then blackmails Nick into helping her once she realizes that he was involved in the otter's last known whereabouts.
Nicholas Wilde, you are under arrest.
For what? Hurting your free wings?
Felony tax evasion.
The film then follows the duo as they find new leads and traverse across unique environments, all of which contain certain jokes regarding the fact that it's a society where animals act as humans, such as animals not wearing clothes being akin to a nudist society, or everyone at the DMV being sloths, or the fact that the menacing crime boss is just a little shrew. All the while, Nick goes from simply wanting to delete the incriminating evidence Judy has against him to actually investigating with her and eventually defending her to the chief once he realizes he sympathizes with her plight.
I was small and emotionally unbalanced like you once.
Har.
No, it's true.
So the pair find out that the otter and his driver went all feral and primitive, but then he suddenly disappears. So they have to go to the Assistant Mayor Bellwether's office to look at the traffic cameras to find out where he went. Also, Mayor Lionheart hasn't really been too kind to Bellwether this whole time, yet she doesn't do anything about it. Eventually, Judy and Nick discover that the mayor has been kidnapping all the savage animals to cover up the phenomenon from the public. Alright, case closed, problem solved, movie over. What, still no? Okay, apparently we have to figure out why the animals are behaving this way too. Considering that the panther guy went savage after the otter attacked him, you'd think that the first guess as to what's going on here is that it's some kind of disease transmitted through bites or blood. You know, like rabies. But then Judy jumps to the wild conclusion that it's because they are all predators.
It may have something to do with biology. Thousands of years ago, predators survived through their aggressive hunting instincts. They seem to be reverting back to their primitive savage ways.
What?
Clearly there's a biological component? Are you serious?
I just stated the facts of the case.
What facts? That was just purely speculation that the scientists spewed out as a possible cause. But you guys still don't know if that's the case, so maybe don't say that unless you're absolutely sure. I'm getting a little too worked up, aren't I? So now Nick's mad at her for relegating all predators to savages. Then we get a somewhat out of place montage of a bunch of animals being scared and angry at predators all of a sudden. This movie went from using animal stereotypes to make jokes to suddenly being like, but wait, this is actually a serious issue? It does make Judy realize the hastiness in her assumptions and the error of her ways, causing her to quit the force and move back home. Then, very shortly after, she realizes that a special type of flower called a night howler can make animals become aggressive. And so she figures that someone must be specifically targeting predators to only make them go savage. She finds Nick, and after some waterworks, they make up. The movie then converges back into buddy cop territory with the pair trying to find the source of the conspiracy. Judy then causes an entire train to explode.
Maybe some of the evidence survived.
and somehow walks away with no consequences? But Nick manages to save a dart gun with a savage-inducing serum, so they rush to get the evidence to the police station. But uh-oh, the assistant mayor Bellwether was the bad guy all along, because she wanted to become the mayor, I guess? And also spark fear in all the prey animals in order to keep her power.
Fear always works. And I'll dart every predator in Zootopia to keep it that way.
She shoots Nick with a savage serum, intending for him to kill Judy. For as tragically ironic as that would be, it's actually just all an act to get Bellwether to expose herself.
Actually, and I'll dart every predator in Zootopia to keep it that way.
It's your word against yours. It's called a hustle, sweetheart.
So she gets arrested, everyone who is afflicted by the serum is cured, and Nick becomes Judy's cop partner. Oh yeah, and also Shakira. It's Shakira, as a gazelle, giving a concert.
You are under arrest.
For what? Hurting your free wings?
Felony tax evasion.
I know I've been riffing on this movie, but I riff with love. I honestly think that my only major complaint with this movie would be the lack of harmony between the more silly and the more serious elements of the film. Yet, it is neither the jokes nor the racial allegory that is necessarily what makes this movie so particularly special to me. Instead, the main thing that appeals to me is most certainly the way the characters of the two protagonists develop, as well as the way the relationship between them grows throughout the film. So let's get started with our first main character, Judy Hawkes. Judy is a strong-spirited, optimistic character who never surrenders. She continually contributes a sincere effort to work towards her goals, even in the face of opposition from, well, pretty much everyone. Her parents didn't believe her dreams were possible, Chief Bogo seems to think she's too meek to be a real cop, and Nick cynically tells her that people actually can't be whoever they want to be. Yet despite this, she is still driven by unapologetic determination. Despite the fact that Judy is the protagonist, however, her general personality doesn't really change all that much from beginning to end. She starts with an optimistic outlook on life, and her ending speech really suggests that she still retains this attitude. What she did learn, though, was a greater awareness of both the nuances of the world she lives in, as well as a greater self-awareness and the ability to check her prejudices and preconceived notions. And it's even more interesting that she was both on the giving and receiving end of stereotype-based discrimination. On the one hand, you could argue that the movie just abruptly made Judy a small-minded jerk in the middle of the film, just so that she could learn a lesson and the movie could have a theme. However, I think the idea here was that her prejudice was very discreet at first, and was implicitly expressed. And it does make sense that even though Judy seems like an all-around good person, she still can have a mild judgment problem herself that she needs to stifle before it becomes too big. After Judy's misguided statement that all predators are, in essence, innately barbaric, we actively see that Judy realizes the major negative impact her assumptions had. After all, at no point in this film does a predator actually become savage just because it's in their DNA. Yes, predators in real life have a natural instinct to hunt, but for the sake of the present day in this fictional world, it's nothing but an inaccurate prejudice. This causes Judy to feel guilty and solely responsible for the public unrest and hatred towards a group that is not even necessarily a threat, especially after it caused her to lose a friend that had grown dear to her. And can I just say, when Officer Clawhauser was forced to move from the front desk on account of him being a predator, it was just so sad. He's portrayed as the sweetest and most innocent person who is very good with people, and therefore this should be the perfect position for him. And yet, he has to leave the job he loves just because of the assumed possibility that he could be dangerous. Naturally, this makes Judy even more upset, and eventually she makes the mature decision to resign. Even when given the opportunity to reap the rewards of her actions, she denies it because she realizes her mistakes. She then moves back to her parents' home, and I just love the parallels and references here. They really underline Judy's character development. At the beginning of the movie, Judy says,
Gideon Grey was a jerk who happened to be a fox. I know plenty of bunnies who are jerks.
But then later at the press conference, she says,
I just stated the facts of the case. I mean, it's not like a bunny could go savage.
Right, but a fox could.
seemingly implying that Judy believes that, while any animal is capable of mild bad behavior, only predators are capable of being purely malicious at their core. Now, when she meets up again with Gideon, who has completely changed and is fully aware of the harshness of his childhood actions,
I'd just like to say I'm sorry for the way I behaved in my youth. I had a lot of self-doubt, and it manifested itself in the form of unchecked rage and aggression. I was a major jerk.
Oh, I know a thing or two about being a jerk.
Judy ultimately remembers her initial statement that a fox or a bunny can be a jerk, regardless of their species, and to fully emphasize that point, once she learns about the night howler, she exclaims,
A bunny can go savage.
thus officially denouncing the statement she made at the press conference. This scene perfectly shows Judy's growth to abandon her previous implicit, small-minded prejudices and to learn to humble herself in a way that is both subtle yet extremely effective. I'm sorry, but I love it. This reflects the idea that even people who think they have no flaws, or generally seen as having no flaws, should still check themselves and their beliefs to ensure that they are not harming others. If so, then they should have the humility to surrender their pride, acknowledge their mistakes, and become a more understanding person as a result of it. And that's what Judy does. She begins the movie with ambition, yes, but also with a more narrow-minded and almost selfish view of her endeavors, believing that bunnies are the only group that has ever been victimized.
Ooh, you probably didn't know, but a bunny can call another bunny cute, but when other animals do it, it's a little...
However, after spending time with and empathizing with Nick, she has the revelation that there are other people with similar situations whom she really must ensure she is actively trying to give equal opportunity to as a police officer. Therefore, while Judy doesn't start the movie completely heartless or anything, by the end, she definitely implements a more lasting open-mindedness and responsibility as the core motivation of her actions.
A good cop is supposed to serve and protect, help the city, not tear it apart.
So for the most part, I definitely think that what they intended to do with Judy, they fully succeeded at. Then Judy goes back to find Nick, and just everything she says here is so accurate to her character development. You may think that Judy's crying was just a dramatic way to get Nick to feel sympathy and forgive her, despite everything that she's done, but to me, it does feel like she's actually distraught and genuinely sorry for hurting Nick in the way that she did.
I know you'll never forgive me. I wouldn't forgive me either. I was ignorant, irresponsible, and small-minded. I have to fix this, but I can't do it without you. And after we're done, you can hate me. And that'll be fine, because I was a horrible friend, and I hurt you, and you can walk away knowing that you were right all along. I really am just a dumb bunny.
This film actively takes the time to show how much Judy has changed and also indicate that she fully realizes that she doesn't feel like she deserves forgiveness. I mean, Nick forgives her anyway because it's a Disney movie, of course he does, but considering how stubborn and prideful Judy was beforehand, especially when regarding Nick and his cynicism, her breaking down into tears here shows raw, sorrowful emotion, since she never would have wanted to let her guard down before. As a result, this entire interaction to me feels like a genuine humbling of Judy's pride, and therefore, legitimate character development. I also really like what Judy says in her speech at the end that I had previously overlooked.
We all have limitations. We all make mistakes, which means, hey, glass half full, we all have a lot in common.
Essentially, yeah, she says that people should not look down upon others based on just superficial traits, but it goes a little further than that when she also argues that you shouldn't forever shun people with deeper flaws because everyone has flaws. Therefore, simple condemnation will get you nowhere. It will only be beneficial if you lovingly address other people's faults and help them improve. But just in case you're still skeptical about whether Judy deserved forgiveness at the end, I would like to propose that it's less about deserving it and more about Nick being the bigger person. And I think that's what this film is trying to suggest. And if that's still not enough for you, well then, so be it. 'Cause Judy is not the only main character here. Nick is obviously the contrast to Judy. Whereas she's overly optimistic, he's cynically realistic. Whereas she believes anyone can do anything, he conforms to social norms. As a result of this initial closed mindset mentality he has, Nick has a lot more room to change, and as a result, his character arc is a lot more defined than Judy's. What sets this movie apart from other films that deal with prejudice is that it also includes people's personal disbeliefs in their own abilities, and Nick is a great example of that. His second interaction with Judy implicitly highlights the way he feels about himself.
Everyone comes to Zootopia thinking they can be anything they want. Well, you can't. You can only be what you are. Sly Fox, dumb bunny.
His cynicism comes from the belief that no one would ever believe in or support him, and therefore he doesn't have any passion or willingness to try to be anything other than just a sly fox. This is eventually confirmed later on in the movie.
If the world's only gonna see a fox as shifty and untrustworthy, there's no point in trying to be anything else.
This is just speculation, but it's quite possible that Nick doesn't even really enjoy being a con man, but he has just contented himself with this path that he feels like he's been forced to take. But it is Judy who shows Nick that there is at least someone in the world who believes in and respects him. In his very first interaction with Judy, despite the fact that he is just conning her, it really seems like he's serious when he says no one ever treats him with respect.
You know, it burns me up to see folks with such backward attitudes toward foxes. I just want to say you're a great dad and just a real articulate fella.
Well, that is high praise. It's rare that I find someone so non-patronizing.
Which is likely why Judy's persistence and continued optimistic attitude does slowly start to make Nick believe in himself, as he realizes that, like Judy, he doesn't have to stick to preconceived stereotypes either. And I think that's also why watching Judy lose her optimism and have people not believe in her causes Nick to stand up for her. He can sympathize with Judy, as he too has faced the cruelty of others trying to suppress his ambitions with world-shattering realism despite his initial optimism. And by now he's seen not only Judy's ambition, but also her ability. She has found so many good leads from just a tiny bit of initial evidence. So to see her not only be so restricted by Chief Bogo, but to also lose faith in herself, it makes him upset, and understandably so.
You gave her a clown vest and a 3-wheeled joke-mobile in 2 days to solve a case you guys haven't cracked in 2 weeks? Yeah, it's no wonder she needed to get help from a fox. None of you guys were gonna help her, were you?
We then get to the very next scene, which is often hailed as one of the most emotional and most tragic animated moments in recent Disney history. After all of the implied motivations behind Nick's decision to defend Judy, here we get his full backstory. As he says in this amazing scene, he once was exactly like Judy. He was ambitious, optimistic, and determined that others would accept him, regardless of him being a predator. But then, all his supposed prey animal friends maliciously attacked and muzzled him for no reason, simply because he is a fox. Naturally, this experience is and would be so jarring and distressing for someone so innocent like young Nick, who doesn't understand the prejudice and instead believes that there must be something fundamentally wrong with him, that he just can't and will never be treated the same as everyone else.
No! What did I do wrong, you guys? No! Tell me, what did I do wrong? What did I do?
That would have been truly traumatic, and therefore, as a member of the audience, I can really empathize with Nick's experiences. Here we get the official confirmation that Nick isn't just some sly and cynical character for the sake of being comedic. While yes, comedy is a large function of his character and a part of his personality, the movie still actually gives him a legit reason for his mentality. He has merely submitted to the role that he feels everyone expects from him, and was so bitter and hardened by the actions against him that it molded him from this innocent child to a cynical adult. His reservations to show any sentimental emotion is built on a fundamental lack of trust with anyone, stemming from this single traumatic experience. Yet in this scene, I believe that Nick has finally realized that somebody, namely Judy, genuinely cares about him. So much so that he actually trusts her enough to let his guard down and uncover this long-masked trauma. And although we don't know how many people he's told this story to, if anyone, it still is portrayed as such a personal and intimate moment between the two of them.
If the world's only gonna see a fox as shifty and untrustworthy, there's no point in trying to be anything else.
Nick, you are so much more than that.
Now, dealing with the backstory of a previously comedic character is a tricky thing, and there's definitely the possibility that it could have been done in an unsatisfying or predictable way. After all, if you grew attached to the comedically mean and charismatic Nick, you wouldn't necessarily want him to suddenly change into a sappy character. Especially since previously, it seemed like nothing could ever cause Nick to lose his humorous and charming attitude, no matter how deep Judy's remarks cut.
What is your problem? Does seeing me fail somehow make you feel better about your own sad, miserable life?
It does, 100%.
However, I think the thing that really makes this scene work is the aforementioned fact that Judy lost her previously unfailing positivity as a result of Chief Bogo's oppression and intimidation. You could argue that the back and forth between them before was nothing more than fun and games. But now, after seeing the full extent of the prejudice against Judy and how it can reduce such an optimistic person to utter despair, it makes Nick more deeply understand where Judy's coming from, as well as reminds him of his own past. It's up for you to decide how well this movie managed Nick's character arc, but I think another reason that the scene specifically feels so great is that it just feels real. It's not melodramatic, and it doesn't exist just for its own sake. Nick's emotions and the way he expresses them feel genuine. Especially by the end when he tries to deflect the emotion with jokes once again.
Boy, look at that traffic down there. How about we go out to Chuck in Traffic Central? Chuck, how are the things looking on the jam cams?
Nick, I'm glad you told me.
Speaking of Nick's character arc, this brings me to one of my favorite scenes in the entire movie, which I know doesn't really mean much, but I digress. So throughout the film, both Nick and Judy have been investigating the case, but it's clear to the audience that Nick is actually doing a lot of the detective work himself. Judy even mentions this.
You know, I think you'd actually make a pretty good cop.
Oh, how dare you.
Then, at the press conference, Judy actually proposes that her and Nick become partners and hands Nick a police registration form. And instead of being reluctant, this time he seems to be genuinely grateful that she would consider him, and so you actually start to believe that he is interested. That is, until Judy makes the colossal misguided mistake of broadcasting the theory that it is the predator's natural instincts which is making them go savage. As Nick is hearing this, he observes the photos of all the muzzled predators, triggering his own PTSD, which was established earlier in the film. Despite just telling Judy how much the generalization of predators as savage has negatively affected him, she still goes on to carelessly make that same generalization. Judy is oblivious until Nick brings to her attention that, hey, I'm a predator too. Does that mean you can't trust me either? Judy somewhat patronizingly tries to deny this, but then makes even more unfounded assumptions.
I mean, it's not like a bunny could go savage.
Nick becomes increasingly upset and then pretends to threaten to eat her, causing her to reach down for the fox repellent she had. Nick, receiving confirmation that she still does not trust him, feels offended and betrayed, and so he sorrowfully leaves Judy.
I knew it. Just when I thought somebody actually believed in me, huh?
But not before giving her back the registration form where, wouldn't you know it, we see that it was completely filled out. Okay, first of all, when did he have time to complete the form? He was just standing there the whole time. No, but seriously, I love this scene. The sources of drama and the parallels to real-world racism are apparent enough. I've seen people hail the line,
Nick, stop it. You're not like them.
Oh, there's a them now.
You know what I mean? You're not that kind of predator.
as a great representation of grouping a certain type of people into the same general and often harmful category. Now, I'll admit, there is certainly the possibility to look at the scene as just a superficial representation of racism for the sake of fulfilling a quota or something, especially since I feel like Nick didn't communicate with Judy in the most effective way. I mean, Nick's method of figuring out whether Judy trusts him is to threaten her. Like, of course she would be scared of you when you are specifically trying to scare her. And what if she didn't react? Then it would kind of be Nick in the wrong for not trusting in and trying to manipulate Judy to prove a point. If I were to rank who was more in the wrong, however, it would still definitely be Judy. She did jump to some major conclusions, and she said that a bunny couldn't possibly go savage, which she ends up being wrong about. Regardless of Nick's tactics to reveal Judy's treachery, however, the fact of the matter is, Judy knows about the trauma that Nick experienced as a child due to the prejudice against predators. And yet, what does she do? She continues to carelessly imply that all predators are innately corrupt, and that, yeah, muzzling them is not only okay, but important to protect the prey animals. Judy was still extremely insensitive in saying something that she knew would remind Nick of his traumatic experience. Despite previously acting like she was on his side, she proceeded to express the same views that caused Nick's original childhood tragedy. Nick has every right to be upset, and his actions, for as intense as they may seem, are a fitting representation of what he must be going through. Judy not only insensitively triggered his past trauma, but also essentially betrayed his trust. For as aggressive as he acted, everything prior in the movie proves that he still didn't actually want Judy to be scared of him. On the contrary, he thought that Judy was someone who actually trusts him. And yet, in spite of all they had been through, in spite of their friendship, in spite of him standing up for her, in spite of Nick for once in his life becoming vulnerable and telling Judy of his childhood trauma, in his point of view, Judy still doesn't care. Because a true friend would not still be driven by harmful prejudices.
Just when I thought somebody actually believed in me, huh? Probably best if you don't have a predator as a partner.
I think that's what I like about this movie over other racial allegories or stereotype stories. Because that's not what this film is primarily. Other stories that deal with discrimination and judgment often include simple characters without much relatability or nuance. but that frequently results in a superficial story and therefore a superficial message. I am biased in the sense that I love me some good protagonists, but I still believe that a movie's first and foremost priority should be focusing on developing the characters and their dynamics. The theme should by no means be neglected, though. Instead, the message should be implemented in a clever way that makes it much more applicable to a larger audience. But that message will only resonate with people if the movie itself has more complex characters. And that's what I like most about this scene. It's a lot more personal than just a general racial allegory. Nick has genuinely been touched by Judy's commitment to him despite everything that he's done to her, and as a result, he finally lets his guard down around her. And then he actually fills out the form, showing that he genuinely cares about their friendship, only for the mood to abruptly shift when Nick starts to realize that Judy still doesn't fully and truly believe in him. Which is, once again, heartbreaking for the audience, who knows what Nick has gone through with a backstory such as his. Everything about this just feels so real and genuine, not just an artificial manifestation to drive the plot, but actually the way Judy would act due to how naive she has been, and the way Nick would act due to his trauma and insecurities boiling over. However, this is not the end of the story, because this scene is also the pivotal moment for Judy's character as well. Here, she realizes that she still has some lingering small-minded prejudice, even after expressing interest in having Nick as a partner, and that she's seriously hurt and lost a friend as a result of it. This eventually leads to her character arc, which I have already discussed, so I don't need to go too deep into it. So Judy eventually finds Nick again, where she genuinely apologizes for not defending her friend's ability to be a good person. And Nick graciously accepts the apology, which is just such a noble thing for him to do. Judy literally inadvertently causes this utopia of a city to be a lot more divided than it ever was before. And yet Nick still forgives her because he believes that she genuinely wants to fix things. Guys, Nick's amazing. Although I do think that Judy probably blames herself a lot more than she was actually responsible for. It's implied that the city did still have problems even before she got there.
Don't give yourself so much credit, Hobbs. The world has always been broken. That's why we need good cops like you.
And this whole thing was a conspiracy by Bellwether, but I'm getting off topic. So you know the rest. Nick rejoins Judy, he helps her catch the real culprit, and he ends up accepting her offer to join the police force. You know, before I knew much about this movie, I really didn't think he would become a cop by the end, because that would mean he would lose his charismatic, law-bending personality that people love him for. I feel like the first time I saw this film, I desperately wanted this movie to make Nick's overall story unpredictable. To me, his tragic backstory, as well as him eventually becoming a cop, were the obvious routes for a buddy cop movie such as this to go. But I feel like I now realize that these moments, while maybe you could see them coming, are still greatly important and beneficial for Nick's character development, as well as the message of the movie as a whole. The weight of the story would largely be diminished if Nick didn't have a similar experience as Judy to connect with her. And while he certainly didn't need to also become a police officer by the end, it really doesn't hurt the movie in my eyes because 1, the rest of the film still works really well, and 2, it fully shows his character arc. Not in the sense that he needs to be a police officer in order to be a good person, but rather it shows his allowance of trust towards Judy, exemplified through his acceptance of her offer to become partners. And if you're anything like me, and you value rich character development and dynamics, even more so than plot twists or having the most accurate racial allegory ever, you will most likely love this film just as much as I do. Alright, I'm almost done. Just lastly, I want to talk a little bit about the relationship between Judy and Nick. Okay, so there is an elephant in the room, no pun intended, and that is, are they like together? Are they dating basically?
You know you love me.
Do I know that? Yes. Yes, I do.
All I have to say is, it really doesn't matter to me. Whether they are romantically involved or just friends, their dynamic is built on friendship, and I think that's the most important part. This film does a great job of building this friendship from the beginning to end. The first scene where they interact feels very genuine, despite, you know, the fact that it isn't. But even though they start out not being too fond of each other, the more time they spend together and the more fun they have with each other causes their friendship to gradually grow. Every interaction between them is either really funny or really emotional, and yet the movie strikes the perfect balance between these two different tones in relation to their dynamic. But so what, you might be thinking? This seems to be just like every other buddy cop movie. What makes this friendship so particularly impactful? And I think the answer is the immensely great way the movie has the relationship with each other impact each character's personal development. I've mostly already talked about this in great detail, so I'll try to keep this brief, but the way Judy's optimism inspires Nick to let his guard down and actually start to let himself trust others and be trusted in is not only very impactful, but shows an identifiable turning point in the growth of their friendship. And that's why this scene with them on the gondola is just so good. I've said it before and I'll say it again. Their relationship feels real. Additionally, Nick's more realistic attitude and traumatic experiences causes Judy to see a more nuanced perspective of the world. Not necessarily a pessimistic one, but one that allows her to be more empathetic towards the plights of others who are also suppressed. Her initial optimism was a lot more superficial, but she now realizes that creating peace and unity is much more complicated, but nevertheless important to actively fight for. The movie really spends the time to show how each one learns to understand the other deeper. And as a result, it makes the friendship feel much more genuine and deserved. Overall, it's a very wholesome, mutual friendship where they both become better people after meeting each other. If you can't tell already, I love this movie. On the surface, it just seems like another anthropomorphic animal cartoon or another silly buddy cop movie. But when you dig deeper, you find a greater story about dealing with internal and external prejudices, as well as the idea that you don't have to restrict yourself to your reputation or the expectations of society. You can change and improve your character, regardless of your past mistakes. And dig even deeper still, you find the heart of this movie. Two people named Judy and Nick. Not just animals, not just protagonists, not just characters, but real, genuine people who grow as a result of their experiences and develop a legitimately wholesome and meaningful friendship. Okay, I think I've said everything I wanted to about this movie. I could probably talk for hours more about the jokes, the other characters, the plot, the tone shifts, but I'll spare you. This video is already long enough. Obviously, not everything this movie tries to do is executed perfectly, but the positives really do outweigh the negatives. If you somehow haven't seen this film yet, I would highly recommend you watch it. It is one of my favorite Disney movies of all time, and it's actually widely agreed to be a good film, unlike literally everything else I've reviewed on this channel. As you can probably deduce, it took me a long time to create this video, so if you enjoyed it, please consider liking and subscribing and all that good stuff. Because I promise I will be reviewing some more actually good movies in the future. Now if you'll excuse me, I'm gonna go write a script on why Cars 2 is an underrated masterpiece. Oh yeah, and one more thing.